Review Radio.
Hello and welcome, everyone. It is Friday night, and you're listening to Paranormal Review Radio, the only radio show without commercials and with more great paranormal talk. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Anthony Agati in New York.
And I'm Lucy Liebfried in Chicago. You are listening to one of the highest-rated paranormal radio shows on Blog Talk. No bull, no lies, just a true platform for everyone to share their knowledge and experiences. When searching for the truth, good communication is key. Now, our phone lines are open for questions or stories. The number to call is 661-244-9831. Make sure you press the number 1 to get into the queue, and we'll try to get to you as soon as we can. Otherwise, the chat room is open, so you can post any comments or questions there as well. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Paranormal Review Radio. You'll find more articles, blogs, and full show uploads. And if you have specific questions, comments, or would like to be a guest on the show, email us at paranormal.review@aol.com. Now, sit back, get comfy, and prepare to open your minds. It's time for Paranormal Review Radio.
If you Google the term, what happens to us after we die, you'll notice an impressive list of religious and theoretical websites that stick to a strict term based on ancient philosophy. The textbook definition of the afterlife states that in philosophy, religion, mythology, and fiction, the afterlife, also referred to as life after death or the hereafter, is the concept of a realm or the realm itself, whether physical or transcendental, in which an essential part of an individual's identity or consciousness continues to exist after the death of the body in the individual's lifetime. But what does it truly mean? Does any of this answer the real question about life after death? As we search for answers to quench our fears, we get lost in the abyss of all sorts of explanations, and sometimes it's hard to get back to reality or even possibly a strong foundation to begin to receive the knowledge. That's when you need a profound person who has done much research and gained much knowledge to help us navigate through what's truth and what's false. Writer, director, author Richard Martini is an award-winning filmmaker who has written and directed 8 theatrical features and a number of documentaries. His first book, Flipside, A Tourist Guide on How to Navigate the Afterlife, went to number 1 twice at Amazon in all its genres. The book is based on transcripts of a documentary he made, which is available at Amazon, called Flipside, A Journey into the Afterlife, and Gaim TV. His latest book, It's a Wonderful Afterlife, Volumes 1 and 2, is where he expands the research into the afterlife from Dr. Michael Newton's work to include interviews with a number of scientists in the field of consciousness. Richard has done an extensive work in the field to give us the answers we have been looking for. We are excited to speak to Richard and raise the bar in our own research. So please help me in welcoming Richard Martini to the show. Hello, Richard. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Hi, Anthony. Thanks a lot. Wow, that was a really fantastic introduction. I want to meet this guy.
Well, here you are.
Here I am. Well, it's interesting the way what you were saying about the definition of the afterlife. It's a great question because when I stumbled into this research, just, as we all do, stumble our way through life, and then you suddenly find something that's so fascinating you can't put it down. I, too, was curious about, well, what happens after we die? And, when you point out that the sort of technical term, the idea is that some part of our consciousness lives on. And that's right there. Even in that example of it doesn't bear out in the research. It's not that some part of our consciousness lives on. It's that some part of our consciousness is here on the planet while we're alive. And it's when we pass away that smaller part of our consciousness, and this is based on the thousands of interviews I've done, that smaller part of the consciousness that is with us while we're alive returns home. And it doesn't sort of blend into the vast, universe, which is what a lot of religious sort of New Age concepts do. It returns to the other 2/3, and that's kind of the number that people have come up with. The other 2/3 of your consciousness is always back there at home. And the way I try to help people understand what people are saying, okay, and this isn't a philosophy or belief, this is just me interviewing people who are under deep hypnosis, or, as you mentioned in the new books, people who have had near-death experiences, and then asking them to do another hypnosis session so they can clarify stuff that they saw. When people have a near-death experience, they kind of feel like, well, how could I access it again? I was in a car accident.
Right.
And then I'm there saying, well, let's go back there. And, of course, their initial reaction is to say, no, I don't want to go back there. But, of course, everything that happens to us, as we know, is in the computer of our brain. Everything that happens in our lifetime is up there. So you can access anything that happened to you in life. The day when you were 5 days old, it's there. You can access it if you know how, to ask the right questions to get to that space, let's say. And what's interesting about hypnosis, the stuff that I've worked with, and it's really a misnomer, because you're never under with this technique. It's more like a yoga meditation where somebody gives you a guided meditation. So you're always conscious, and you're aware of what you're seeing. And the only thing the hypnotherapist has asked you to do is just say whatever comes to your mind. And so as you're talking about what you're seeing, your conscious mind is going, well, how can I possibly be seeing this? How can I answer these questions? These are not things that I'm aware of. But in the construct, they say, look, just say whatever comes to your mind. And as you start to speak, you start to realize that there's a narrative of, let's say, a previous lifetime. There's a narrative of what you do between lifetimes. There's even a narrative of what's happening to the other 2/3 of you while you're here. I know this sounds a little bit, paranormal, but this is just what is consistently reported, in these research that I've been doing for the past, 10 years now, I guess. So,
well, Richard, you know what? First off, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to talk to you. Like I mentioned to you before, I read your book. I'm totally fascinated with it. I thought it was a great read, and people need to read this book. But I want to ask you about your journey into what that you're doing. Were there any difficult moments that may have made you doubt about the knowledge that you were receiving, and maybe gave you pause and think about what you might be heading into?
Every step of the way, every step of the way, which is pretty unusual. I mean, it's funny, when you look at it from that perspective, which is, what the heck? And, I'll just give you a background of me. I'm a filmmaker, like you mentioned, and, just traipsing through life, and I had a very, very close friend who was passing away back in '96, Luana Anders. She's an actress, and we're super close. And so I was spending a lot of time with her. But then when I sort of spend time at home, she would come and visit me in my dreams. And I thought, okay, that's a dream. But in one particular dream, she came to visit me, and she was younger than when I met her and talking to me. And I realized, wow, this is so weird, because I recognize her voice, but it's not as I met her. And then when she passed away, she continued to visit me. And then at one point I was in New York City, I was working on the Charles Grodin show, and I had an out-of-body, she was good friends with Chuck, and I had an out-of-body experience where I felt like I had the experience of, that's the only way you can describe it, I felt like I went to visit her. I felt like she dragged me out of my body, an out-of-body experience. I'm sure you guys have talked about this stuff. But I traveled into deep space. That's the only way I can describe it. It sort of felt like. And I went to a place where she was. And when I got there, on this incredible, speedy journey, she opened her eyes as if to say, you were looking for me. Here I am. And I had been thinking, look, if she came to visit me in dreams and stuff like that, and after she died, well, then she must exist somewhere. Where is it? And so now here she was, opening her eyes, looking at me as if she was saying, here I am. Outside my window, I was in Manhattan at the time, some guy laid on his truck horn, which didn't wake me up instantly. What it did was it made me come back. So I experienced the journey, coming back from wherever she is, almost like through some kind of a wormhole and then back through space, and then I saw Manhattan coming up super fast. Anyway, I sat up in my bed and said, what the heck was that? And that put me on the journey where I said, I've got to find out, can I go back there and visit her? If she still exists in some other realm, how do I get there? So started studying Tibetan philosophy because, Tibetan Book of the Dead. I thought maybe they had an insight into that. And I became friends with Robert Thurman, audited his class at Columbia. And we went to Tibet together, and I shot a documentary for Tibet House. And so that was a really interesting journey. But for those of you familiar with Buddhism, they believe that between lives we're like a wisp of smoke, and we sort of, based on karma, we, show back up here, reincarnate based on who we were before. But between lives we're not fully conscious. We're just, like I said, wisp of smoke. But my experience being in deep space, I was fully conscious. I mean, I was fully aware that it was me seeing her. So ultimately, I picked up a book by Michael Newton, Journey of Souls, and my friend Luana, when she was passing away, she kept saying, or she said to me anyway, I have this recurring dream that I'm in a classroom in another universe, and everyone in the classroom is dressed in white, and they're speaking some language I've never heard before, but somehow I completely understand. And I thought, okay, well, that must be the morphine drip. She had cancer, I thought, oh, that's, hallucinating. But then the day she died, her close friend called me and said, I had this wonderful dream about her. She was in a classroom in the fourth dimension, she said, dressed in white. And I thought, wow, classrooms, what? I mentioned it to the nurse, her hospice nurse, and she said, yeah, that was her recurring dream. So when I picked up Michael Newton's book, first chapter, there's a guy under hypnosis saying, oh, I'm back in my classroom. In between lives, everyone's dressed in white, talking about things about spirituality. And in that moment, that little moment of clarity sometimes you get in their life, a little ding. Like I was trying to say to Lucy, the reason she lives so close to Wrigley Field is because she's supposed to be a Cub fan. That's like a ding. That would be like a ding in her life. But in my life, ding. All right, this looks like an interesting documentary, right? If I'm going to find my friend Luana, here's how. Let's talk to Michael Newton. And then I thought, I read his books, and here he was saying that over 30 years, 7,000 people, different people across the planet, took him to the same place between lives. Now, like anybody, I thought, oh, come on, that can't possibly be. How could 7,000 people say the same things? I mean, it should be different, right? Person to person, depending on their experience. But no, he was talking about like a structural architecture of the afterlife. And so I called up the Newton Institute and I asked if I could interview him, and they said, no, he's retired, but he's going to be at a conference in Chicago. This is 2008. No, I think maybe 4 or 5, something like that. Anyway, so I said, oh, I'd love to film if I could. And they said, sure, come on, which I thought was unusual. So they let me film their conference where they were teaching people how this method that he has sort of perfected. And so I started filming, and and as a filmmaker, I'm thinking, well, the camera's not going to lie. If a hypnotherapist is, directing someone, saying, don't you think you were Cleopatra, maybe? Or, look around you. Does this ship look like the Titanic? You can see those things really quickly on camera, or acting, or somebody, making stuff up. It's just easy. I mean, I've been doing it my whole life, so I can kind of spot it from a mile away. And I just thought, well, this will be interesting. And I started filming, and as you saw, Lucy, the book, flip side, the first interview I filmed was unbelievable. This one remembering a lifetime in Auschwitz. And ultimately they said to me, would you like to try it? And I said, oh, wow. Well, then I'm not really a journalist if I'm doing it. But then I thought, well, George Plimpton was a journalist, and, he did everything, Paper Tiger, Paper Lion, became the football player to write about it. I thought, well, then at least I can try it. And then I thought, wow, this is a great opportunity to disprove it, because I didn't think I could be hypnotized, first of all. And then I thought, well, they're not going to direct me anywhere. Like if a guy tries to direct me, I'm going to say what I see. If he says, what do you see? And I don't see anything, I won't make something up. You with me? So I went to this conference out in Schaumburg, and we did like a 4.5-hour session. And all I can tell you is I had the same experience that everybody else had in Michael Newton's books, and as well as the people I had been filming, where I not only saw a previous lifetime, I also went into a realm or a zone where I could see people that I haven't seen forever, my father, people who passed away. And I mean the experience of holding their hand, looking them in the eye. It's something that that other people don't know. You can tell them, I saw my dad. They look at you like, what? But, when you look your father in the eye and he smiles and says something, you're like, Jesus, that's Dad. And I found Luana. I went to her classroom. I had a very strange experience of interrupting her classroom, like walking into her classroom and having everyone in the classroom like sort of stop what they were doing and turn around and go, like, who's this? If you can imagine that construct, I'm standing in a classroom somewhere in another universe. I look in the back row. There's my friend Luana, but she's about 22, like way before I met her, ponytail, and she's looking at me with her hands up like, what? What are you doing here? Why are you here? And I just I'm talking to the hypnotherapist, so I'm talking aloud, Like imagine, suddenly somebody came on the line and started talking. We would be like, excuse me, hello? But that's what I was doing. I was talking aloud in the classroom, and the whole class sort of stopped what they were doing to listen to me. And one of the students in the class, in my mind's eye, actually turned around and said, you don't know what you're talking about. And so that was even strange, because consciously I'm thinking, God, if I'm making this up, why would I make up an interloper, some guy, who's challenging me. But somehow I was speaking from a higher self. I was speaking from that two-thirds person's perspective back there. I was saying things that I, Richard, have no conscious idea of, about healing light in the universe and how it works and how doctors channel it while they're doing their work. Things that I don't have any access to that in my memory or brain. I've never seen it, heard it, read it, but I was saying it. And as Lucy can attest, it actually makes sense, what these people are saying, you see? So ultimately, that became my journey, and then I started filming people. I've filmed, I think, 30 now, 30 sessions, because, again, I take my camera in. I've chosen the person, usually a skeptic, sometimes a friend who I've known since grade school, so when they start talking about something that happened when they were 10 or 11, I can see it myself because, I was there. Right. And then so I know when they start talking about their mother or their father, I know who they're referring to, And then when they're in the life between lives, when they're having that experience, because I've been there before, it's like watching a close friend, take the same dip in the pool that you were in. So ultimately, though, after I finished the book and I just started talking about it, I was in Virginia Beach, and I was invited to the University of Virginia, where they have the Department of Perceptual Studies. It's a high sort of, cutting-edge, high-end place where they study consciousness from a scientific level. Dr. Bruce Grayson is one of the people who runs it, and he's sort of the father of near-death experiences. And I told, and he invited me to tell my research to their panel. So I sat there for like an hour and laid out all these cases that I had witnessed. And he said, Rich, science doesn't consider hypnosis a valid scientific tool. And I said, well, okay, that makes sense, except you have thousands of people all over the planet saying the same things about the afterlife, even though they've never met each other and they come from different backgrounds. Even that is a statistical subset, something you can examine, you know. And he said, well, you know, there's no one to pay for that kind of research because you can't market it as a pill. And that's who, you know, pays for research. So I went, okay. So then I realized that near-death studies had been studied scientifically, and he's like the leader of that group. And so what I did was I started tracking down either friends or other people who've had near-death experiences, and then either they'd already done it or I arranged for them to have a between-life session, a hypnotherapy session, where they could re-examine that event again. You know, from the moment the car accident happened all the way through to where they met people on the other side. And then because I'm asking questions, I can throw some questions in. I can get them to sort of look around themselves. You see what I'm saying? So they're back in that same moment when they saw bright light. But now we're introducing the concept of, is there anyone else around you who can help sort of explain what's happening? And, you know, they're free to say no, but they almost always say yes. And then the question is, can we talk to that person directly? And you start to hear their experience from another person's perspective, like as if like two people being in a car accident. You start to hear, and they start to tell you, oh, well, this is my friend Peter, you know, and I've known him for many lifetimes, and we've had many journeys. So it becomes this fascinating, what I call it is data, because ultimately what I'm doing is I'm gathering data, which is eyewitness reports of people, consciousness not only, you know, continuing on, but returning home. And those reports, and science just asks two things of us, really, basically, that your science is consistent and replicable. Meaning I could take Lucy or you, Anthony, and we could sit in a room and I could put my camera on, and with the help of a hypnotherapist, or what I'm discovering even now, maybe not, just talking to you and asking you questions about your journey in this life, we can access realms that you're not even aware of. They're almost just under the surface. And the reason I mention this is because that's what my latest book, it's called, I think I'm calling it Hacking the Afterlife. The idea being tongue-in-cheek, that I'm talking to people on the flip side and asking them for help or advice, not only for the individual who's, you know, channeling or helping me talk to them, but also for people on the planet. So let's say I get to a spirit guide, you know, in the construct is there's a person sitting in front of me having coffee at Starbucks, and we just start talking about their journey in their life, et cetera, et cetera. And eventually I start asking questions about if they've had any weird dreams, and then based on those weird dreams, we examine the dream. And then I say, well, let's just talk to somebody in the dream. They look at me like, what, are you nuts? But I go, just see what comes up, you know. What's the first thing? And ultimately, I found in this very non-scientific manner that you can ask people questions of the most profound nature. A close friend the other day was remembering, and of course, put in quotes, remembering, but experiencing visually, as we were having coffee, a lifetime in, like, I think it was like 1853, and he was Spanish royalty, and he had been captured for trying to murder a prince, and they tortured him, and he had to give up all the names of his friends. Now, he's telling this in a narrative. I'm asking, where are we? And he's saying, you know, Spain, and I'm saying, what's the year, and et cetera, et cetera. One detail, he said the town was Taormina, and I happen to know that Taormina is in Italy, but I also happen to know in 1853 Taormina was part of the Spanish, part of Spain, because they ruled Sicily and, you know, Naples and stuff like that. So everything he said was accurate. I was able to look up the castle he mentioned, and I was able to look up some of these details and some of the names, and et cetera, et cetera. But ultimately, you know, which all sounds like a parlor game, you know, who were you in a past life? But ultimately, you get to this question of, is I asked a spirit guide, I said, can we talk to somebody? He was like, sure. I said, so why are you allowing him to see this lifetime today? And his spirit guide said, to show him that there is no action that you can commit that you can't recover from. And as he said it, tears welled in his eyes. We had been talking for maybe 15 minutes. It was that close to the surface, that idea that something had happened in a previous lifetime that was obviously still with him on some level. And even if his subconscious is making it up, it's still there, you see? I mean, it's still valuable to examine it so that he can come to some sort of conclusion about it. Anyway, so hacking the afterlife, because then I asked these spirit guides, whatever, quote, spirit guides, whoever this is, maybe it's their subconscious, I don't know. But I asked them specific questions. Okay, so while we're here, can you tell me, how do we change salt water to fresh water in a very inexpensive way? Or, what can we do about carbon emissions? Or how can we help the planet get a better energy policy? And the reason I ask the question is not because the spirit guide's going to suddenly go, oh, well, here's the answer to that. It's not their field, right? We don't know what their lifetimes have been. And they may say, it's not my field. It's, beyond my pay grade. But the point is if you can get people to answer that question, if you get 10 people to answer the same question, there's somebody here on the planet who will read that answer and go, oh, I see what they're saying. Yeah, we can figure that out. That's how you do that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's not for my benefit. It's not even for the person's benefit who was talking to us, but it's for somebody listening to your show now or somebody, reading the book who goes, oh, okay, all right, Anyway, I blabbed on and on and on. If you just start me up, I won't stop. So
no,
tell me, what do you guys want to know?
I'm intrigued. One of the things, there's two things that, give me the fire in trying to do the little research that I do within the paranormal and learning about the afterlife. But there's two things that I'm striving for when it comes to trying to get answers on things is, what is the afterlife? What is it all about? And two, are we supposed to know the afterlife? Are we supposed
That's
to...
right.
Understand it, or should we know what the afterlife is all about? What have you learned about that aspect?
Well, here's what I liken it to. I liken it to, my wife doesn't like this because she feels it's like a pejorative, but I say think of it as a play. Life is a play. And I'm also finding out that the time involved, like 100 years here feels like 25 minutes over there. That's what I'm getting. So, I'm giving it a number, but the relativity of 100 years here feels over there like not that long, okay? So think of it as a play. Just imagine a lifetime, 80 years is like roughly a 2-hour play. So you and I and Lucy, we all get together before we come here, and we say, now what are we going to do this time? And don't forget, our 1/3 of our energy that was here is now backstage with, the cast and crew, and we're all sitting around talking about our next play, and we're talking about it from a spiritual level. And Lucy says, oh, I want to live so close to the Cubs, but I don't want to see a game. And Anthony goes, I want to live in New York. And I go, all right, hold on, guys. All right, we can do this. Let's figure it out. Who's going to be your parents? Who's going to be your, et cetera. And so people work out, not exactly, but they kind of work out the 3x5 cards of what the journey's going to be on stage. And then we come here, we pick up props, we pick up costumes, we pick up roles. I'm going to play the billionaire with goofy hair. I'm going to play this character. And we actually present, and I've just recently filmed a couple of people talking about the presentation of where they sat in front of their counsel and said, here's the lifetime that I've planned out. And they laid it out, he said, just like a dissertation, where he just went over all the possible things that he was going to learn and people that he was going to help. And I can tell you that in the research, what people consistently say is that we come here to help others. It might be to help ourselves. That's part of the journey, of course. Good actor on stage, yeah, I'm going to become a better actor. But we also, on stage, help others in our acting troupe. so and so has always had a hard time with addiction or letting go of anger or fear or something. And so I say, well, look, here's how we do that. In Act 2, I'm going to do this to you, or you're going to stumble down this pathway, and you're going to try to take drugs, but in Act 3, you're going to stick around and you're going to solve that. So you will learn that lesson. So we all agree to come and participate. I know this sounds loopy, but this is kind of the way it works. People come and they participate. They play their roles. Some of them play them really, really well. Some of them play them too well. Okay. Some of them don't like the role they've chosen. They thought they could play it, and they hate it, and they step off stage. And when that happens, in the middle of a play, somebody jumps off stage, exits the scene, checks themselves out. Even though they've agreed to participate in the play, it screws up the play for everybody else. So ultimately, when we all get backstage, we turn to our loved one and say, "What'd you do that for? Don't you remember there was a whole third act?" And then they say, "Oh, that's right. But, listen, I hated being there. I just couldn't. I know I signed up for it. I just couldn't take it anymore. I had to get back here." And because this is the experience that people report backstage, it's unconditional love back there. And we say, okay, we understand, but next time, let's try to do it so that we go all the way through the play to the end. And they go, okay. I mean, imagine how much work is involved, to get to that third act. Everybody participating, everybody growing up, going to college, meeting the right person, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So using the play example, once we're done, once we're there in our dying scene, hopefully we've acted well all along the way, and we have our dying scene, we get off stage, and our friends applaud us. Sometimes our friends go, "Oh my God, I had no idea that was how you were going to exit." I mean, I've never seen anybody's head fly off the stage like that before. That was like shocking. We were all totally shocked by that exit, but we applaud you for it. That was an amazing exit. Because once you get your mind around this concept that we don't die, we can't die, we can't be killed. I mean, our bodies do, of course, but who we are goes back. Once you sort of allow that into your consciousness just for a minute, like, oh, wow, okay, well then everything that happens on stage is something that happens on stage. No. Well, your question was,
Richard,
what happened? Yeah.
I have
well,
a
let me
question.
I just want to finish this
okay.
one thought with Anthony's question, which was, are we supposed to know this? And I'm a little bit like the guy in the back of the theater who turns on the lights and goes, "Hey, everybody, it's a play." And who wants to hear that guy? Everybody on stage stops and they look off stage and go, "Shut up. We don't want to hear that it's a play. That's why we're here. We're learning." So, yes, I think that some people need to hear that it's a play, that way we return, because then maybe the planet needs it. If you are going to reincarnate and come back here, doesn't it make sense to leave behind fresh water, fresh air, and fresh land, not only for your children, but for yourself? And that's why I think people like myself have been allowed
Richard, are you there?
Uh-oh. Did we lose him?
I think he's still showing that he's on.
Yeah. Are you there, Richard?
I'm going to dial him back.
All right, let's see if we can try and get him back.
Yeah.
I just have to warn everybody that's actually listening right now. There's a lot of freaky things that are going on during this interview right now, and Lucy and I will explain it after we say goodbye to the guest, because we didn't want to interrupt him during this great and fascinating talk about the afterlife and how to navigate it. One quick fun fact about Richard Martini, as Lucy is trying to get him back on the line, he was the director of the great, and to me, I love this movie, You Can't Hurry Love in the 80s. If you all remember that movie, Richard Martini was the director of that, and I believe the writer as well. Amazing, quirky, typical 80s movie, but one of my funny favorites from 1980. Let's see if we can get him on. All right, we're having trouble getting Richard back on. So as we were doing research for tonight's show, there's many questions that we've talked about the afterlife, and
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We got you?
Now, I just want you guys to note at what moment that happened. Because I could hear you. I was fine. I could hear you fine. But I just want you to know, what was I saying?
You were finishing up the story about the reason about is there a purpose, or should we know about the afterlife? And
Exactly. And I was just saying, I'm in the back of the theater turning the lights on and saying
yes.
It's a play. Now, yes. I got to tell you, I've done 10 years of this research, and just about every time I get to some sentence like that, the phone goes dead, or something happens.
Well, as Richard, as we were trying to actually get you back online, I was telling the audience that we've had something happen. I've had something happen as you've been talking in the background, where something has been falling, which I'll get into later. But there's a lot of freaky stuff that have been actually happening while you were talking, and I didn't want to interrupt anybody with that story. But that is freaky. This is the first time it's actually ever happened, or you said that it's happened every time?
It happens all the time. It happens all the time. But here's my point. It's when you look at it not from this like creepy, scary, eerie thing, right? Which is two ways to look. You experience anything on in a stage, right? You go on and something happens goofy or serious. You can sit there and go, "Oh my God," or you can find it amusing.
Yeah.
And I've found that talking to people on the flip side, they have a sense of humor. So the idea of, just as Richard is saying, he's talking. Not everyone's supposed to hear that it's a stage. You see. And so there's some people who were listening in who turned off the show at that moment because it was like, oh, he's gone. But they're not supposed to hear that. And, I honor that because, look, I run into people all the time. I have relatives, who say to me, you're like, you're doing sacrilege stuff. This is heresy. What you're saying is so anti everything that I've ever believed that it annoys me. And all I can say is, well, that's your path, you see, and that's okay. You chose to come here to learn the lessons you're supposed to learn here, and far be it from me to be the hall monitor who stands up and goes, I'm going to give you a penalty for, learning this lesson. I firmly believe that, in answer to your question, long way around, that the reason I'm talking about this stuff is because it's healing for some people. And that's why I'm doing it.
That's a great.
I mean, I've had the experience. I had the experience. I was doing a book talk at the International Association of Near-Death Studies in Tustin, California. A woman wandered in sort of in the middle of the talk, and I saw her looking at me like with this really stern look on her face. And I was talking about, we choose our lifetimes. And things that happen that are bad in our lifetime may be, not random, but because we've chosen to learn a lesson from that. And then eventually we go back home and talk, or, a classroom, and we learn from that class, and we go back home and talk about what we learned. And she came up to me at the break and said, are you telling me my daughter was murdered? Apparently she was part of an incest survivor group, and she had gone to the wrong meeting that day. She had wandered into the wrong room. And so she said, are you telling me my daughter was murdered so that she could learn a lesson? How dare you? And I thought, oh, yeah, okay, well, can we sit down and talk? And I as best as I could, I said, have you felt your daughter's presence since she passed? And she said, yes. I said, well, was she a happy person? Very happy. I said, do you think that she'd want you to go through the rest of your life with such rage and anger? She said, probably not. I said, well, now consider for a moment how difficult it is for her to reach you with the kind of energy you have. She's over there, wherever she is, and she's trying to let you know she's still in existence, and she's shown up to do so. So you kind of want to honor that, just that alone. She went, all right, let me think about it. About a month later, I was giving a book talk in Santa Monica, and I saw her in the back of the room. And I thought, oh, she's come to get me. But she came up to me afterwards, looked at me and said, I just wanted to look you in the eye and say, thank you for saving my life. And I said, oh, I'm not saving your life. This, it's the research here. She said, no, but you showed me this path, you see, where I can understand that it's possible that she still exists. And if it's possible she still exists, then it's possible that I should not be so unhappy. And the next time I saw her, she had started a comedy improv class. She had gone from, and she said, I went to my incest survivor group, and they said, what happened to you? You're like smiling, you're like a happy person now. And she said, I read this book, Flipside. But my point is not about me or the book. It's about what was, because these are transcripts. This is not me talking. These are transcripts of what people said. And it was specifically so that she could hear that it's possible that her daughter not only still exists, but she will see her again, which is a wonderful thing for people who've had, terrible losses, as we all have. So,
well,
anyway,
Richard,
where were we before we... Go ahead.
I just can't help but think, and while I was reading, okay, I mean, if we're all, if our energy keeps going and we're there, and we're either young spirits or old spirits in human bodies, and we're playing out our parts, how did this all begin? I mean, is the spirit world reality to begin the process for us, or was it achieved in some other way?
Well, I liken that. It's a great question, and I can tell you that when I've asked a question like that, or had somebody, a hypnotherapist, ask that question, mm-hmm. you get varying degrees of it's above my pay grade, or I can't really access that, or I can't really talk to you about that because it's not something I'm really allowed to talk about. Okay, and so it's almost like going to a secret university. And then you go into the class and you go, how did this university begin? And everybody stops and look at you and they go, don't talk about the university. But I can tell you that in the cases that I've examined and my own ones that I've filmed, I get a sense that the universe as we know it has done this many times before. So in other words, the Big Bang, the idea of the universe beginning, and then millions of years go by, and then, dinosaurs and da-da-da-da-da, right? And to this, point in time where we're having this conversation. Well, what I'm hearing is that this isn't the first go-round. We've had other, and beyond that, there's other realms and other universes. So, and then the other thing about time, this is something that I'm sure you guys have heard. I've heard a lot of people in, this area say, well, time doesn't exist once you're off the planet. That's not in my data set. What I'm hearing is that time is extremely different, relatively different, but that 1,000,000 years, or, like I said, 20 minutes is like 100 years. So if you think about somebody who lived 2,000 years ago, you're talking about somebody who lived 20 movies ago. So it's not so outside the ordinary that somebody in a near-death experience or while under deep hypnosis runs into somebody that's a historical figure. Because for us, it's hard to fathom, like, well, that guy lived in the 1500s, or that guy lived 2,500 years ago. Well, wait a minute. Over there, it's not that big of a deal. And you find these characters, I mean, this is going to sound sacrilegious, but, the angel Gabriel is mentioned in the Bible quite a bit. He's also mentioned in Islam. So this dude, Angel Gabriel, shows up to Mary, he shows up to Abraham, he shows up to Muhammad. Let's just pretend for a second that people aren't screwing up his name, that it actually is a dude named Gabriel. And when you step outside of time, showing up in 500, showing up in 1500, those are all things that are possible in that construct. Okay, I'm not saying it's the case. I'm just saying it's possible. So when you start, I've had sessions where I'm filming somebody and I'm asking them the questions, or the hypnotherapist is, and I'm throwing questions to the hypnotherapist. But I filmed a woman who's a medium who lives out here in Los Angeles. She's very successful, very talented. I've been able to verify what she does and a lot of other stuff. But here she is talking about an experience that happened, I think she said something like 10 million years ago. In this kind of research, it's like you don't judge the answer. Somebody says this happened 10 million years ago. Well, then, okay, what happened? Is she accurate? I don't know. Is she talking about a different realm? That's possible. Right. I also met somebody who talked about an experience that he had while under hypnosis of visiting the planet Earth when it was in its early stages. In his memory of that event, he was with a group of people who were overseeing the genesis of the planet. And when I talk to people who go to classrooms, I've talked to people who have shared their stories with me, where they're in a classroom talking about other planets in the universe that they're seeding or that they're using to seed that will eventually become Earth-like, okay? Not so that we as human beings can fly there, but we as human spirits can eventually inhabit there. I've interviewed, and Lucille mentioned this, but at the end of Flipside, there's a guy who claims that he normally incarnates on another planet in the universe, and that this was his first journey here, and it's been very difficult for him because he doesn't like it here. And it's not as highly, intelligent as his friends back home. And you hear this in the paranormal research, Pleiades, and, these different places. And it's all possible, but it's possible. But all I can say is, from the data point, I can tell you this, the Newton Institute's research, when Michael Newton was practicing up until about 94 or something like that, or he retired, I think, around 2000. But anyway, up until that point, about 10% of the clients he was seeing claimed that they had some form of off-planet experience, a lifetime where it wasn't here. Just in the last interview I did with Peter Smith, who's the president of the Newton Institute, which is in It's a Wonderful Afterlife, he said that number's gone to 30%. So it's either because people who feel like they have off-world experiences are coming to see a hypnotherapist trained in the Newton method, okay, it's either that, or more people are here on the planet who normally incarnate somewhere else. So, what does that tell us? All I could say is that in the research I've found that for aliens, I don't want to call them aliens because, sometimes they're like friends of ours, people have had off-world experience. When you interview them and talk to them about their experience and their lifetime, you get the same pattern of the same sort of architecture of that when we go back home, we're there with our soul group, anywhere from like 3 to 25 people roughly. The average is about 15. They're people that we normally incarnate with. And even within our soul group, there are people who may have been on other places and other planets. And again, I'm talking about this like it's normal, but like I say in my work, I try not to judge what people are saying. I try to just write it down or take a note and say, okay, well, this guy says that, he's reincarnated on planet C71. Is there anybody else? And then somewhere along the line, I get somebody else who says, yeah, I know him. I remember him from, planet Xenon, whatever. And then that sort of opens up the door, which is, well, maybe there's religious characters who created religions here on Earth who are remembering a lifetime on a previous planet. I mean, certainly people are aware of, L. Ron Hubbard's science fiction work. He's talking about some planet that he seemed to be really up on. I'm not going to knock him because I'll get a lawsuit, or I'm not going to promote him because whatever. But Joseph Smith was a guy visited by a ghost, or, a man dressed in white who started talking to him about things in another realm. Muhammad was a guy living outside a cave, and an angel came to him, Gabriel, and brought him in and took him somewhere where he started hearing things about the nature of existence. So what I'm trying to say is I think we've had constant reports of the flip side, constantly throughout human history. And because we have the internet now, and I'm not going to be burned at the stake, and I'm not going to be dunked in a pool of water, we can talk about this stuff. You guys have a talk radio outlet so that we can chat about this, and no one's going to come over and shut your place down, you see? So this gives us an opportunity to share stories that aren't of this realm. Does that make sense?
Well, Richard, with all this, I mean, it's so fascinating, and a lot of this just clicks, and a lot of it does make sense. But is there an important lesson on life that we should understand while learning about this afterlife? Great
question. And I can only quote the ancients, which is a silly thing to say because, as we know, they have the power to turn off my phone. So they're not so ancient that they're right next door. But that aside, I have a friend who was a film producer, a skeptic. She said, I want to try one of these sessions. And I said, why? She said, well, I'm having an operation, so I don't believe in anything you said about the afterlife. I don't believe in an afterlife. I don't even believe I can be under hypnosis. But my doctor told me that, before I do this operation, if I have hypnosis, it might help. I said, okay, great. So I said, why don't you write down some questions? So she had 3 questions that she wrote down. She didn't believe she was going to get anywhere, but she did. And I worked with Scott DeTamble. He's in Claremont, California, lightbetweenlives.com. And Scott's a good pal. So we go out there, and like I say, she's a skeptic, but instantly she's remembering a previous lifetime in 1840, and I was able to look it up online, the name of the town and this family and all this stuff. And then she went into the Between Lives realm. It was fascinating. But she gets to a point where she's talking to her spirit guide, and she asks these questions. And one of the questions is, what or who is God? And this is in response to what you asked, Lucy. Is there something that they say over there can help us? And the answer was, he said, the idea of God is beyond the capacity of the human brain to comprehend. It's too much information. However, you can experience God by opening your heart to everyone and to all things. And I realized, as much as that sounds like a bumper sticker, God is love. No, it's actually the opposite. Love, the thing that connects us, the thing that makes unconditional love, that thing that we can experience with some members of our family, hopefully, sometimes with a loved one. Unconditional love, that is the nature of who we are. That's the nature of what God is. And the only way, if you want to experience God, open up your heart to everyone and all things. And the other thing was, when I did my first session, at the very end, I asked my counsel, that's all I can describe it. I said, guys, is there anything I can tell people back on the planet that will help them? And what I heard was, just let go. And I realized it meant let go of anger, let go of fear of death, let go of resentment, let go of all these things that are not who we are. You don't let go of your connections of love, because that's the unconditional love part, but you let go of all of that icing that's on the cake of who we are, which is nonsense. Fear of money fears and other fears, politician fears, all that stuff. It all will work itself out, and people will rise to the occasion of whatever it's supposed to be. And then you'll eventually see that this is you're here to learn these lessons participate, but at the end of the day, you don't take any money back to the flip side. You don't take any clothes or cars or any of that stuff back to the flip side, but you do take the love, the people that you helped, the people that you changed their lives or opened their hearts. That's who you get to, hang out with on the flip side.
That is so beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful.
Well, thank you.
It really is.
But, well, all I can say is, for me, it's very unusual. I'm a film guy. I just wanted to make movies, and I had no desire to go down this path. But once I started on the path, and I started to realize that all of the stories and movies I had worked on, my own stories, they all had this element of either people pretending to be somebody other than who they really were, the element of people showing up after they died. Ghosts show up a lot in my work. Nobody's seen my work. It's okay. But whatever, I've seen it. And I know there's, frequently in a film that I make, somebody appears or something happens from the flip side where they learn some lesson. And I realized, okay, this is a good point, which is I got to ask the question, why did I choose Rich Martini? I was there in front of my counsel, and they told me to bring a list of questions, and I thought, well, that's a great one. Why do we choose ourselves? Why did I choose Anthony? Why did I choose Lucy? And the answer was something I had never conceived of, but what they said to me was every thought, action, word, deed contains energy. So if you sing a song, or you write a book, or you write a poem, or you draw a painting, it contains some form of your energy. And that energy can be focused and healing, like love. I wrote this song out of love, and then everybody who hears it experiences that on some subatomic level. So the idea that I could choose a lifetime in film, because I realized that film could be healing. That in comedy, you go into a movie theater, and you laugh out loud, you forget everything that's going on in your life. You're just focused on the laughter. Change of disposition is such a healing thing to do. I said, tears work the same, but they require catharsis. Now, I never used catharsis in a sentence in my life, but as I said it, I went, oh, yeah, that's right, catharsis. You cry, and then you get through it. But I said, I just wish I had chosen a filmmaker who had a better career. And I got a laugh from my counsel, who was sitting in front of me, in my mind's eye. And then I got a laugh from the hypnotherapist who was taking notes while I was doing the session. So it's the only time I got a laugh on two different planes, simultaneously. But I also became aware in that moment that, okay, well, this was part of the journey. We all look at our life and go, God, if I only had sold that concept earlier, or only if I had cast this actress instead of that, whatever. If only this door had opened instead of that one. We do spend a lot of time with that. My career would be this. And I realized also in that moment, this is all part of my plan. But the only way I would get to talk about this research was not to have a career. To be a filmmaker, but not to be so successful that I was more interested in the yacht, or the trip to Cannes than I would be, in the trip to the flip side. And so you have to allow that for a second, which is, and what I tell people, I know we don't have much time left, but what I tell people is think about the first conscious moment you had in your life of what it is you're going to do in your life. I asked an FBI agent that, and she said, when I was in preschool, I said, how did you know in preschool you're going to be an FBI agent? She said, I kept lists on everyone, what they ate, what they wore, what they came to school with. People do have an idea of their life's journey. Kids sometimes tell you. And you, if you really look through your life and go, wait a minute, when did I first consciously know, I used to play with the radio in the garage or whatever. Used to get up on stage. And you see that your life is more organized than you think it is. It's not as chaotic or as weird as we might imagine it to be. And that's also true in love, that when you examine that moment when your significant other was in in your face and you suddenly went, oh my God, this is the one. I've asked a lot of people this question, and when they get to it, when they get to that very moment, they'll say to me, I'll say, why? So why? You know, what happened? What was the feeling? What was the emotion? And a lot of them say the same thing. They say, I don't know, he or she just made me feel like I was home, like I was unconditionally loved. It's like they get a glimpse of that time when they planned their life out. So I would, if we had more time, I would go through both of you and I'd find out, and when you really examine, listen, I've had a lot of people go, oh, come on, I met her at work and, she just worked out that way. But when you ask her, she'll say, oh, well, no, I knew he was the guy. Don't ask me how I know, but something about the look in his eyes, something about the sound of his voice just made me feel like I was home. And Lucy, Anthony, me, we all have different ideas of home. There are no twins that have the same idea of home. Home is different for everyone. So we can all agree, though, that home means something. It means something to do with comfort, something to do with acceptance, something to do with unconditional love. And, so knowing that we have a home that's not here, I think is not a scary thing. I think that's a wonderful thing. And then why not make this adventure as much fun as you can?
Wow. Richard, this is like so mind-blowing, and it's absolutely amazing to get your take on the afterlife. So what I do want for our listeners, where can they go to learn more about you and purchase your books and see your documentaries?
richmartini.com, very easy. I have lists, I usually have blog about stuff that have Prince's death, stuff like that, and unusual tales that people have. And then there's links on both sides. And if you go to flipsidethebook.com or flipsidethefilm.com, those are more direct links. But you can find me on Amazon. You just search for Rich Martini and Flipside, and, Bob's your uncle. I appear.
Well, you know what, Richard? Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We would love to have you back on the show.
Excellent. Oh, especially when I'm done with Hacking the Afterlife. I'd love to share the new tales from the flip side with you guys.
That would be wonderful.
Absolutely. And we're actually going to post all the links that you just discussed on our Facebook page, Paranormal Review Radio, for everyone to actually check it out. Thank you so much, Richard. We enjoyed this.
Thanks, guys.
All right. We're going to talk about this for a long time. So thank you, and hopefully
we'll
talk to you very soon. Take
Go
care.
Cubs,
Have a great
Lucy.
weekend.
All right, thanks, man. All right,
Thank
see you later.
Rich.
All right, be good.
Bye-bye.
See you on the flip side. Okay, bye.
See you on the flip side. I've listened to many different interviews about Richard and that Richard has actually done over the years. The many conferences that he's done, seminars, and just regular radio and television interviews. Read his work. When I first heard about him and learned of his work, it amazed me because. This doesn't happen. I think I've said this a couple of times. Maybe just on my hand, I can count as many. When I read and when I see other people's work, and it makes that clicking noise, and the connection that I feel with whatever is being said or discussed about the paranormal, obviously that enthralls me to learn more about that person, about that research, how they came about, and learning about Richard Martini. One, he was great. He's a great director and writer. He has an amazing career in the paranormal research field and in the afterlife research field, and he has been alongside a bunch of the greatest minds and greatest scientists that are out there, either in the past or currently right now. Dr. Bruce Grayson, who, we've talked about on the show many, many times. He is a phenomenal speaker on near-death experiences, and the case studies that he has done will blow your mind just as much as Richard Martini's cases have done. And so, you can't just pass this information up. You can't just, okay, Richard Martini has done this work, great. No, we have to talk to him. We have to find that out. And learning from tonight, just, he's a talker. He is, engaged in this concept of the afterlife and trying to convey that to the masses, to the public. We just let him speak. I didn't want to interrupt. I wanted that natural flow to come from him and to be able to convey to a lot of people who are listening to the show and soon to be watching it on YouTube that, everything that he's talking about, I'm sure people are going to say, you know what, I don't believe in that. It doesn't jive with either my background, my history, my religion, my theology, my belief system. But I understand when people get into those modes. And I think in the end we're all going to learn what the truth is. Obviously it's inevitable. We will learn what that answer is in regards to the afterlife. But it's interesting to see the many cases that Richard and Dr. Michael Newton has done and Dr. Bruce Grayson has done in in all the different cases that they have worked with near-death experiences or under hypnosis and doing the past life regressions and understanding those details of each of these lives during the cases, and then seeing the matches that happen to people who don't know each other and who are saying similar things. And I'm not talking about, going through the tunnel and seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and being embraced by your loved ones. I'm not talking about that. I'm actually talking about the specific details that Richard Martini gets into with just his cases alone, talking about, learning and dealing with different people. And like he mentioned before, understanding and knowing somebody else who has been on another planet that they can name and that they can, actually connect with and are very similar. And so it's interesting to see how are those connecting? How do those people know each other? And so the only way really that you can explain it is that there has to be some sort of truth to what Richard is talking about and what Dr. Newton is talking about and Dr. Grayson is talking about. And so you can't just put that aside. You can't just, file it away in a drawer and say, okay, that's just another set of research. I take what Richard is talking about and I take what a lot of similar folks in his field and his level of knowledge, I take that to heart, and it's always on the forefront of my mind. Even in my book, I've talked about Dr. Bruce Grayson in one of the chapters, and if you have not learned anything about Dr. Bruce Grayson and his work, I implore you guys to actually go out there and Google his name and just learn about the different things that he's talked about. If you're really not interested in Richard Martini, which I don't know how you cannot be, but if you don't take him, go to Dr. Bruce Grayson and understand his cases and learn about the stories that he's gone under. It will blow your mind. And it is detailed, it is recorded, so it is not BS. In my opinion, it's not BS. And I can't say enough about Richard and his work that I get excited about. It's not every day that you can talk to someone who has done that work and done that research and worked alongside such great minds out there that, hearing this knowledge firsthand, being able to share it with you guys out there is exciting to me.
You know what? Reading the book, okay, a lot of things kind of clicked, okay? And like you said, you may not believe in reincarnation. You may not believe, in this process. But when you're reading, there's so many things that these people are relaying. This isn't Richard giving, he talks about his experience, but it's not him. He's a messenger. That's the one thing that I got from reading all these accounts. And how you choose to be in whatever life you are. Part of what the main thing that I got from this is that he chose to be a messenger. He was given this glimpse into what is out there in order to relay it. And it's really weird because you start thinking, okay, someone is a messenger. So not everybody's going to listen to that one message, but certain people might. Certain people might tune in tonight. Certain people might pick up that book. Everything falls into place. Everything happens as the way it's supposed to be. So you may not become aware of this now, but maybe further down the line you will. I mean, it's so amazing. It's so much bigger than we are. And it gave me chills just to think about this. I mean, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And a lot of these things kind of just clicked into place for me.
I asked Richard the question. There's been two things that have been on my mind, ever since I stepped foot in the paranormal realm, and it's, obviously trying to understand what the afterlife is all about, and I think that's what everybody tries to get an answer to, whether you're in the paranormal or not. They say that, obviously death is on the minds of everybody, and it's the one biggest fear that everybody has. Besides how you die, it's what happens after you die. Where do you go? And that's where religion and, a lot of these other outside aspects create that comfort for you. And, whether it is the religion that does it for you or whether it's not the religion that does it for you, either way we strive for some sort of blanket to cover us and sort of relieve the fears that we have of this impending step that we take. And a lot of people think of it as the end, and it is the culmination of the reason why we are living here. But that's such an antithesis to what Richard Martini is talking about, that this is just one aspect of our spiritual life that we truly are. We are the spirit life. We are that energy, that consciousness that everybody talks about. And one of the questions that we were going to ask, or try to ask, but we couldn't fit it in tonight because of the length of knowledge that Richard was talking about. But one of the things that we wanted to talk to him about was the idea, and I'm trying to find out where that question is. Why do we? I just lost my train of thought. I hate this. There's so many things that happened tonight that we have to talk about, and I'm going to get to in a minute because it's been rattling my brain and rattling me all night. Lucy, I lost my train of thought. Forgive me.
It was a question that you wanted to ask that we didn't get to?
Yeah, and I can't remember now the question. I'm looking through the list that I have here. It was one of your questions, I think. I can't think. But anyway, sorry for losing my train of thought. But anyway, again, I don't want to start to ramble on about Richard and his work because I don't want it to seem phony. But it does excite me to understand the idea of that. There isn't an end to life, and it's everything that we've always talked about. Obviously, the paranormal. If you believe in the paranormal, you understand that there is life after life. We don't just end here, and we've always talked about light and energy, and how it can't be transformed or stopped; it just continues. And so, is that spirit and energy? Is that consciousness the energy that continues the existence? And what Richard was talking about is that we're only on this planet to learn a lesson. And you know what? I think now I just remembered. I think it was about why do we need to learn these lessons? Why is it that that's the case, or that's the reality and the truth of if we are a spiritual life? Why do we have to learn lessons for? Is it that we're trying to better the spirit? Are we trying to grow the spirit? As we physically grow and mentally grow here on earth, are we trying to do the same thing with our spiritual life? Are we trying to understand the concepts? When we think of the afterlife, and people have said this many, many times, that, when we die, sort of the purpose of life or the meaning of life just comes to us naturally. That answer is just given to us naturally, and we don't really have to do anything. It just, that knowledge is gained once we've crossed that threshold. Well, if that's the case, then what's the meaning of all of this reincarnation and coming back? And so, is that the right answer, or is what Richard and folks within Richard's level, is that correct? And so, I'm not sure what to think at this point, but it's really good and it's really healthy to try and understand and to consume that knowledge, to try and see if I can make something out of it in my little tiny brain that I have, to understand the concept of what afterlife is. Now, people can say that this is also a comfort thing as well. It's quenching my fears of death. And so is this my religion, quote unquote, my religion, that I'm adhering to and abiding by, this sort of understanding of the paranormal world? Is that my religion? As people who are within the churches are trying to say that we go to heaven and blah 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 blah, or wherever, is it the same kind of blanket that I'm trying to put on myself as they are as well? Could be. I'm not denying that. I find comfort in the idea of trying to find an answer. It's almost consumes my life, and I'm sure Lucy can say the same thing too. It's consumed, our lives, just to try and understand what it is. And whether or not we're supposed to know the true meaning of what the afterlife is, I think some of the glimpses that we've been able to cash into, either personal experiences that we've had and you guys have had out there, I'm sure, or it's the experiences that we learn from folks like Richard Martini. It's I don't know, it's a fun journey, and I'm enjoying myself. I'm eating the popcorn along the way.
Well, it's an amazing journey, but you know what? The thing that I feel, how it's the evolution of our spirit. All of these lessons that we're learning, your body grows. You're in this body. You're born. You're a child. Your body grows, You're not born 6 feet tall. You have to grow into that. I kind of get this feeling your spirit is the same way. You're still you, and maybe there's no age, and maybe there's no physical, characteristics that the spirit will fall into, because you're just energy. But I also feel like that all of these lessons are part of that evolution of the spirit. So whatever lessons we learn in this lifetime just strengthens that spirit and brings you to where you're supposed to be. The next lifetime may give you something that you missed this time, or it may expand upon something that you've learned within this lifetime. Part of me, listening to this journey and learning more about what Richard had to say, what really struck me was the message of love, the unconditional love, which I truly believe is the force that guides everything. And I know I can go off sometimes and I sound, like a Hallmark card, but I truly believe that love can fix everything. And part of me feels so sad for the ones in this lifetime that don't believe that there's anything else beyond this, that this is it. And I don't think that's the case. But in their journey, that's their lesson that they have to learn. Once they get to the other side, if there is another side, they'll learn either it is or it isn't. But that's their lesson.
But you know what, also, too, one of the things when I was reading Rich's work, and he equated it tonight to the same thing that I was thinking when I was reading it, is that, it's a play. You're playing a character.
Mm-hmm.
You're an actor in the play of life. And so we get to choose the character that we want to play. And so I think the people who, I must have chosen Anthony in this lifetime to, either go through this experience and sharing it with others, or maybe there's some other reason as to why I chose this life, but I chose it. And before choosing it, you fully understand and know what happens during the course of it. And so it's like, I read that bio on that character. I like that. I'm going to play that one this time. And boom, I'm in that body. I'm Anthony right now. And so I think the people who are, non-believers or people who are skeptics or whatever, they choose to play that role because they want to play that side right now. They want to understand how a person lives their life, sort of not believing in the paranormal or feeling as though that there isn't anything after our lives right now, and so they want to feel what that is. They want to understand how a human person goes through life understanding that and having that knowledge. And so it's not a matter of, they're going to take it and learn the lesson. I think it's just a matter of, they're playing that role to try and understand how a person copes with it, how a person expresses whatever that emotion is or whatever that belief is that they have. And that's, basically what Rich is talking about, and that's sort of what I took from his work, exactly, word for word, that it's a character you're playing, basically.
Well, I got some questions as to why I chose this character. I do. I mean, just, things in my life, childhood, all of this. I do have those questions, and I honestly would love to do one of these hypnosis sessions. I really would. Would you do it?
I would definitely do it in a heartbeat. I've done stuff online where, it's sort of like stealth past life regression hypnosis that you can listen to. I don't know if they worked or not. There was one time that we talked about it on the air, but I don't know if it was actually truth or not, or it was just my imagination working and creating the story. I don't know. But while I was doing the research for tonight's show, one person came to mind about this, and I'm not sure if he's listening, but I hope he is, and that's Kai Blackwood. And Kai has questioned the meaning and the purpose of choosing Kai Blackwood and the life path that is Kai Blackwood. And if you don't understand who Kai Blackwood was or is, go back into our archives or check back on a previous shows. I think it was a couple of weeks ago or a couple of shows prior to this one that we had him on. And, he brought it up on a previous show that we did months back, excuse me, but he also brought it up again when we were talking to him just, recently. Why would I have chosen this life? And I think learning and understanding what Richard Martini, within his research and Dr. Newton and Dr. Grayson, I think you sort of get a better understanding of possibly why you did and maybe a better feeling for yourself and for your life as to the reason why you chose it. You chose to understand what a person like Kai Blackwood or like Lucy Liebfried or whomever is listening to us right now, why you chose that character is because you wanted to understand how that life worked and how what the meaning of being you really is. And you can go back to what Richard talks about. It's going back to the classroom and sharing that experience with your fellow classmates and, sort of conveying all of these things. There's also, another area to Richard's work that we didn't get to talk about, and it's also actually Dr. Newton's sort of main focus in Journey of Life research is that, there's young spirits and there's old spirits, and, there are different aspects to what you can do and what you can learn, and sort of how much it's sort of like being an assistant and being a manager. You sort of have more freedom and more power when you're a manager than you are as an assistant. And so when you are an older spirit, you get to be able to choose more freely what you can do and how you can go about in this life. And so I think one of the aspects to it is that, and it sort of explained what suicide is, to a certain degree, that you can actually, sort of come out of that character and go back to the classroom, wait for everybody else to come back to the class, and then either choose the same path again and it's sort of like doing a redo. And, I don't mean to make light of suicide, but I'm just talking about the aspect of the research that's been done in regards to this sort of life between lives and reincarnation and near-death experience all in one, and how that operates. And that was fascinating. I was really enthralled about trying to understand what that was and what that meant, and why people would do that.
I don't know, but I think it's fascinating. It clicks so much for me. And the only reason why I say that is because in my own life, in my waking life, and the way he's talking about, like, I really want to read the book about hacking into the afterlife, because there's too many things in my own life now that touch on different times. It's not all here. There's too many things in the daily life that I have that does touch on previous times. I mean, out of every place in the world, why am I so fascinated with England? Why was it that I had to go? What is that connection? I have no connection whatsoever to this country. But yet, there is a part of me that is just thirsting for every bit of knowledge that I can get about this place. So there's certain things I think everybody can look into their own life and see these little connections. I think the hypnosis is wonderful, and I really do want to try that. But I also want to see what is it that we can pick out from daily life that makes a connection. I mean, this is all one big, wonderful present. And I'm untying the ribbon slowly, and I can't wait to get inside the box. I really can't. I want to see what's in there. And maybe I won't know. Maybe I won't see it in this lifetime. Maybe I have to wait to the next one.
There was a funny thing that popped in my head also, too, actually just today, before going on air, was I sort of regressed back to when I was a young kid, maybe 7 or 8. I remember going over to my cousin's house, and she was older than me. She is older than me. I think she's about 3 or 4 years older than me. And so I remembered whenever I would go over to her house, I hated to go into her bedroom. I never liked to go in there, because on the top of her hutch, she had all these dolls up there. And the one doll that I hated was a Native American doll. It scared the living crap out of me. I just thought it was evil. I thought it was I never walked in there. And so there was one time that I told her, I said to her, I'm not going in the room unless you take that doll out of there. I'll come in, but you got to take it out. And I got to talk to her, because I guarantee you she remembers this. But I never wanted to go. I hated that doll. And so I'm thinking, here I am meeting you, and, you're Native American. Was there a foreboding? Was there, I don't know, was there a warning
there?
Yes,
I'm evil.
I don't know.
No, I'm here to help you overcome your fear.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe was I anticipating the fear of the coming of Lucy.
You knew it was going to be trouble. But anyway, that was wonderful. But I really want to talk about what's been going on tonight, shall we?
Yeah. So you guys who are listening to us on radio right now we're not privy to the video that we've been able to capture for our YouTube channel. But for those that are going to be watching this YouTube channel, you will have noticed a few things that happened on camera during the course of the interview tonight. Let me just back up and preface what happened tonight with something that I recorded on YouTube yesterday, and I put it on our YouTube channel. I've had this skeleton prop with me, I'd say maybe close to 2 years now. Never really on camera. I've had it sort of propped for things. There was one time I think we did it as a promo for our show. I put it at our desk, or I think I put a photo of it on our Facebook page saying this is the new mascot for the show. But then I never really did anything. But it's just always been a prop that I've had, in my house. And believe it or not, it's not just during Halloween time. I've had this thing sitting, in my bedroom for, I guess, I'm assuming 2 years, close to 2 years, about that time. Anyway, so I removed it, and it actually was up on top of the shelf, and it's a 5-foot skeleton, plastic. And so I'd taken it off the shelf this week, and I'm just rearranging my little office area here, and because I have not been able to put it into the attic, or I'm not sure what I want to do with it yet. I just propped it on my chair, my desk chair. And so for the past 3 days, I sort of noticed that, not the first night, but the second night, I noticed that the head of the skeleton would turn to the right, and my office space is in the corner of my room, and I have my bed in here, and so I remembered the head of the skeleton looking towards the screen at my desk when I would go to bed at night, and then I'd wake up and the head was actually facing me in bed, and I said to myself, maybe I hit it when I was, going into the room, and that's why the head turned or something. So I didn't think anything of it on like the first or second night or whatever. The third night, because I know after I woke up that second night and I noticed that the head was looking towards the bed area, I had turned the head and had it facing towards my screen. And when I came back from work, I noticed the head had turned. And so I said, you know what, let me try this one more time to see if it's either coincidence or it's just me going crazy. So when I got home from work yesterday, I noticed the head was turned to the right. So I turned it to face the monitor on my desk, and I went away. I walked away. About 5 or 10 minutes later, I came back, and sure enough, the head was turned towards the right. I said, okay, it's not me. Let me just see if this does it one more time on camera. And so I filmed on our YouTube channel. I filmed a video of this skeleton prop on my chair, sitting at my desk, and you see the head move. It's in a course of 10 minutes time, and it moves very slow. But the head is not loose, where it's easily able to really turn. And I show on the video how I can move it around and leave it in different positions, and it just doesn't automatically fall to the right, quickly. So, I videotaped it, and I said, I don't know what's going on. I'm not saying that this is, haunted or possessed. I'm not sure. I wasn't sure what it was all about. But anyway, I made the video and left it up to you guys to actually, figure it out and let me know, whatever. So I thought it was just one-time only thing. So when I was talking to Lucy about it, and I showed her the video last night, I said to her, I'm actually going to put it on camera, because I think I've had this on the previous show. I've had it behind me, sitting on the bed, propped up, and facing the camera, and it really never did anything. So I said, you know what, let's try to do it again, and I'll have it behind me during the show tonight. Did it once prior to the show start, correct?
Right.
So, okay, so I have this thing sitting on the bed behind me, and as Lucy and I are getting ready for the show, and I think we're about to call Richard, or if it was after Richard, I'm not sure, this skeleton prop that's propped on my bed fell forward. I'm not near it. I'm maybe about 3 feet away from it. There's nothing that's tethered in between me and the skeleton prop, and I proved it to Lucy by actually dancing around in my chair, stomping around on the ground to see if it was anything. Maybe while I moved the chair, it sort of rattled the bed and made the skeleton fall over. So I propped it back up again. Then during the course of the interview with Richard tonight, the skeleton has dropped, 2 more times, I think?
2 more times.
2 more times. And at one point, I think it was the last time it fell, during the course of it, I noticed, because I can sort of see it in the camera in front of me, that the skeleton prop was actually leaning and positioned that way for a good amount of time, and I didn't notice it move, and so it was leaning in position for that for a while. And as soon as after I pointed it to Lucy and Lucy saw it, I think it was like 5 seconds later, the skeleton prop then fell again. This time the head came off, and I showed the camera, so if you guys are actually going to be watching this on YouTube, you will see it, and it's all visible on camera. It is behind me, and there's nobody else in my apartment. I live alone. So I'm not sure what it is. I don't know still if this is anything that is paranormal in nature, or if it is just a matter of I don't know, vibrations, earth thing. I can't put an answer to it, but it freaked me the fuck out tonight.
I know it did.
Doing it twice on camera or 3 times, whatever. I don't even know how many. I got to review this video. How many times I did it, but the actual movement of it, and I'm actually afraid to talk about it now, just because I don't know if this thing is going to fall on top of me as I'm talking about it. And it was funny too because right at the time when we lost Richard on the phone. That's when I think it was the first or second time, I don't remember anymore, I can't remember anymore, that it fell. And so it fell at the same time that we sort of lost Richard on the phone tonight.
Well, it's fallen, and you were bouncing around. I mean, he was stomping. He was actually stomping on the floor, and the floor in the room is not it's not the kind of floor that I know for a fact that it's going to, right, it's not going to bounce. But the thing is, the last time that it fell with force. It wasn't just leaning over and falling. It fell with a force, like it had been pushed. That's what I saw. And
that's when
the
head came off.
Okay, yeah, the head came off, and I could see that you were freaking out about it, and it was like, oh my God. But it really, the first couple times it just like fell over, which could have been gravity, could have been anything. The last time that it fell, you hear it. It's a force, and it honestly, what I saw was it being pushed, like it was definitely pushed.
Did you see it fall that last time? Did you notice it fall?
Yes, I saw it. It fell forward, and it went with a force. It really went with a force. I mean, think about it. Force enough that head came off. It's fallen before, and nothing like that's happened.
No, I know, but it falls, and what it does is it falls forward, and it actually hit the desk. It hit the corner.
Did you just move it?
Of the desk. No.
It just moved.
Where, it moved forward?
No, the shoulders like moved, like it was wiggling.
No, my hands are here.
It moved. I swear to God, you gotta when you have to look at this film.
All right, so I'll look at it. I mean, I'm looking at it in the camera. It doesn't look like it's noticeable difference, but I don't know.
You know, just like just wavering, not like it's moving.
Well, here, look.
Yeah, like
I'm dancing right now, moving around, and it's not moving off.
Yeah.
I'm digging into my chair and trying to sort of rumble it, and it's not. Even if I hit it, it's not coming off. I don't know. Very strange. I'm not going to conclude that it's paranormal. I'm not going to conclude that. Not that I don't want to. It's just, I don't know.
I don't know. Like, because I even asked you, I says, could it be gravity? Could it be leaning over? And it didn't move. I mean, you were knocking it and you were pinching it, and it just wouldn't move. But what I saw tonight and what I saw in that video, it's really freaky. Because, like, if you play the video and you just kind of, like, pause it and keep pausing it, you actually see it move in, like if you do a frame by frame, you see this thing move. And it's very noticeable. But I'm telling you, the last time it fell tonight, it definitely fell with a force. Like someone had really just, boom, pushed it. So I don't know what it is. I asked you, do you feel anything weird? Do you feel anything? No,
I don't. There's nothing different. I haven't felt anything, really different. But, like I said, I apologize for those who are listening to this on radio that you can't see it. But, you are welcome to go to the YouTube channel because this will actually be on our YouTube channel tomorrow, the day after this live broadcast on Friday night. I typically put it up on Saturday. So if you are hearing this and you want to see it, check back on our YouTube channel, and I'll have it there. And I'll see if I can actually, when I do review it, to see if I can point out, and maybe I'll make another video to point out the points of which it just moves, just so I can single it out. But it's strange.
Well, one thing, I mean, if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you'll get notifications when these videos come up. And last night, when I saw this, I wasn't prepared for this.
But Lucy thought, she goes, how did you do that? She thought it was a trick that I was doing. I go, that's not a trick. I didn't do no trick.
That's the first thing I asked you. Oh, that's cool. How'd you do that?
I don't know. So anyway, I really do want to thank Richard Martini for coming on the show tonight. He's amazing, and like I mentioned before, one of my fondest memories of the '80s was the movie You Can't Hurry Love, with Charles Grodin was in that. Trying to think, I think it's Christine McNichol, I think, is also in it. There's a lot of good people that were in that movie. It's kind of silly, but it's a typical '80s movie. So if you haven't checked it out, I guess try and check that out. But anyway, thank you, Richard, for coming on the show, and we're going to post his Facebook his links on our Facebook page so that you can check him out. And he did mention that he talked up Prince on his website, and I actually did see and notice that there were a couple of blogs about Prince. I did not read them fully, and so I'm actually going to go back and read what he was talking about at Prince. But I'm not sure if it was sort of like the meaning of or the symbol of his death and the meaning of his death. But I think that's what it alluded to. But I'm going to check it out later. Did you read the Prince blogs?
No, I didn't read the things on Prince. But that is kind of weird that you mentioned it, because I have been seeing so many. I mean, we've lost a lot of people, celebrities this year. But for some reason, Prince's passing has kind of like blossomed a lot of these experiences, or people are posting things about how it's affected them, and it's affecting them more than the other deaths. Not to say that the other deaths weren't sad, anything like this, but I'm seeing a lot of people are posting things, really deep things that they're thinking about because of his passing. I mean, it just struck me as I've read stories about, thinking about Prince's, maybe he has a connection to, the fairy world, to have connection to other things. I mean, when you listen to his music, yeah, of course, it is one thing. His music is it does embody that feeling of love, and, it goes anywhere from sexual to love, It's just really weird, but I see a lot of people that just seem to be posting how much this has affected them. So that got me thinking about, lessons and, in relation to reading this book, part of what we're here, the things that we're doing, they're all things that we're supposed to be doing, even though you say, you have no idea when you get out of school, you have no idea what your career is going to be, or you have an idea, but you don't know where that path is going to go. But to look at Richard's research and to look at what he's saying, we do have an idea of where we're going to go. We may not be consciously thinking about it, but that path is already there. We've already made that choice. So I don't know. This is just like this big door that's just opened for me a little bit more. A lot of the things that he talks about, I've already kind of like in the back of my mind already have believed, but it's really interesting to see and hear someone else say the same thing. And it's kind of like this was confirmation for me for a lot of things that I've kind of like come to a conclusion with. Like I've always, no matter what we do in the paranormal, I still believe for me that we are energy and our energy does not end when this body ends. This is confirmation of it. This is confirmation that our energy does remain. Now, as far as the reincarnation part, I was always kind of, I'm not too sure. But again, experiences in my own life kind of lead me toward that point. And then to hear Richard's research and the things that he's relaying from other people kind of makes me think, you know what? There is something to this. There is something to this. Maybe we do keep coming back and we keep coming back until we've fulfilled that lesson, which leads me to another question. Once we've made it to the point where we have the enlightenment, then what happens? And like you said, I mean, there's some things that we aren't supposed to know. There are some things that maybe we can't comprehend. Those are the questions that kind of like fall into place for me. Yes, I understand the concept of learning lessons through each lifetime. But does it end? Is there a graduation of some sort? And once we get to that graduation, then what? Then where do we go? Or then what happens? Do you know?
Well, actually, yeah, we can leave everybody with that point because Richard does talk about that, and there sort of is not an ending. I don't want to say an ending, but there is another transformation after we've completed the sort of elder spirit responsibilities or tasks, and he talks about it. And I'll leave everybody with that, so that sort of interests you guys out there to take it upon yourselves to read more about Richard Martini's work and his research and the information that is contained in his books and his documentaries. But he does talk about that, and it is interesting. One of the things that you just touched on and mentioned, which I've been thinking about a lot, is there have been a lot of celebrities that have been passing. The latter half of 2015, mostly in 2016 so far. And I like to find similarities in things, whether they are when we do paranormal research and investigations. I try and find, are there common traits that are occurring? And, I'm not sure if this interests anybody, but, you touched on it, and I figured, why not say it. Has anybody noticed the similarities in pretty much all of the celebrities that have been passing on lately in anything? And one of the things that came to mind with me whenever they mentioned the death of a celebrity was their age when they died. And I've noticed a good majority of these celebrities are in their 60s. There's only been a few maybe in their late 50s, but most of them have been in their 60s. If you go back and check them, you'll notice a lot of them are in their 60s. And so is there a reason for that? I'm not saying or I'm not alluding to the fact that there is, but it's just something to note. It's kind of weird and odd that there's a lot of, 60 and some odd number that 60-year-olds that are passing away. I don't know if there's anything to that, but it's a similarity that I found, which I thought was interesting.
Well, I think things like that happen because one of the stories that I posted was about music and things that happened in the music business, people, negative things, maybe curses, stuff like that. And there's mention of the 27 Club, which you're talking about, like you had a lot of musicians that all died at age 27. I think Jim Morrison, oh my God, who else? John Bonham. We're talking Janis Joplin. I mean, there's a lot of people that there was one group at one time that they were all 27 years old. That was that. So could it be like maybe a certain, And this is weird, but the thing that pops into my head is like a train. All the people that are supposed to be on the 60 train, their train has left. All the people that were supposed to be on the 27 train, their train is left. Is there like groupings? Are they all part of the same soul family?
Well, or the soul classroom, or whether they all are part of that
Right.
classroom, that they're just now, going back to their home, as Richard was talking about, and contemplating the new life that they're going to lead.
Right. So
I don't know. It's interesting.
I don't know. There's so much. And again, like with every subject that we do, it opens up a million more questions. So I can't wait to read the second book, because I only read the first one, and I'm looking forward to reading the third book. And I do want to do hypnosis now. I want to do it.
Why don't Lucy's a little excited today because if you're watching the video again on YouTube, it looks like Lucy's wearing her lingerie. She's wearing some leopard. She's wearing some leopard outfit. I don't know. Maybe she's trying to spark some ratings. I don't know, but
no, it's like, okay. People say that I only wear black. Okay, I've had some time. I've been able to go in my closet, clean it out, and I have all these clothes that aren't black. So I figured, okay, I'm going to wear one of them. And the first thing he says when he sees me, he's like, "Will you wear your nightgown?"
But it looks like, I don't know. All right, why don't we get to the fan of the week, Lucy?
Okay, this week our Paranormal Review Radio Fan of the Week is Caroline Abbey of Halifax, Nova Scotia. And I was checking to see she's not with us tonight. But Caroline is one of our wonderful listeners who usually joins us weekly in chat during the live shows here on Blog Talk. And we just wanted to thank you, Caroline, for being part of the family and joining in chat. It is always a pleasure to see you when you're there. So thank you for listening, Caroline, and thank you for being a fan.
Yeah, congratulations, Caroline. And don't forget, if you want to be a Paranormal Review Radio Fan of the Week, all you got to do is just like us on Facebook or subscribe to us on YouTube at Paranormal Review Radio.
Well, you know what? Life is a mystery. Why are we here? Where are we going? These are the things that we don't have any answers to. But do we? What waits for us on the other side when we leave this plane? We won't know the real answer until we take that journey. But until we do, we may have a tantalizing glimpse of what's waiting for us. And it's within our own consciousness. This was a wonderful conversation with Richard Martini, and we totally enjoyed it, and we hope you did too. So, have you ever noticed that you might have been visited by a particular animal at one time or another? Has the same bird or deer appeared to you during a moment of quiet? It may just be an animal spirit guide. And just what is an animal spirit guide, and what message do they bring? Dr. Stephen Farmer is a world-renowned author, teacher, shamanic practitioner, and soul healer. He is the author of several best-selling books. One of the books he's written is called Animal Spirit Guides, an easy-to-use handbook for identifying and understanding your power animals and animal spirit helpers. Dr. Farmer will be joining us next Friday night to help us understand how these precious beings can help us understand ourselves and the world around us. It is going to be a great conversation, so please don't miss this one. We do want to say thank you to the PRR family. You guys take the time to listen to us every week, and we are so grateful for that. Thank you, Anthony, for another wonderful show, and thank you to the Skeleton for making an appearance tonight. So until next week, dear friends, never stop looking for the answers, and have a paranormal week. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Paranormal Review Radio.